All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the May 26th meeting of the Master Plan Oversight Committee. And so I'll call the meeting to order. And so we have a full quorum of members. So welcome. Our first item, I guess it's not on there. I was going to say review the minutes from last one, but we'll probably have.
I apologize. Yeah.
At our next one, I didn't even catch that.
Okay.
So at our next one, we'll review the minutes for both our previous meeting and then this meeting. So then the next item on the agenda is the debrief of the implementation workshop.
Yes. So I'm going to share my screen here, and this is going to be the glut of our time with regards to reviewing the items at our implementation workshop. Specifically, as we've in our breakout groups identified, either revisions that we may want to make to our suggested to our suggested recommendations, as well as some other items for consideration. So let me just share the screen. Yeah, this is a computer that I'm not usually familiar with. So do you see something? Let me see. Hold on. Oh man, I have to, sorry, I have to quickly make a security change here.
Sure.
Let's see. No, I don't want to click Zoom. Oh, here, okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to send this to the board. This is, or to the committee. This is a summary of the implementation workshop by Baird Planning Group. Again, this is, it provided an overview of those items. And this is more so for your information with regard to some of the discussions and the process that happened during that meeting. But what I think the glut of the conversation today will be the recommendations, the suggestions for the recommendations. As you recall, we identified 5 themes that we kind of narrowed all of what was existing in the draft plan under each individual element and putting them into 5 separate themes. So there would be some overlap of some elements from open space, from land, from open space, land use, transportation, economic development. So they identified, the consultant identified some additional language that may help contextualize some of these recommendations, and they're in bold here. And so I guess if we want to just take, the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so to go through these and identify whether or not this makes sense to refine these recommendations as they'll be presented in the actual plan document, and then accordingly elsewhere. But I leave it to the committee to, maybe suggest this. And I do have another form of this in a Word document if it makes it easier to go through them. But this was, I think, presented in a way that could be helpful to the committee. So for the first bullet, under preserving the natural environment, investigating protection of scenic roads and roadway trees through the passage of the Scenic Roads Act. I know that George in my breakout room brought up a discussion point with regards to scenic roads and the Scenic Roads Act. But I think maybe in other groups, it was identified on where certain roads could be designated as a scenic road, and then coordination of complete streets where feasible within those scenic roads. And I wasn't necessarily privy to those other groups, but I guess this is a point of conversation for the committee as to if this needs to be refined or if this is maybe too much, too descriptive. I'm not sure.
I have a couple questions. If we can.
Sure.
So when you said the themes, that brown background there, like preserving the natural environment, are we saying that this was a whole theme and these were all of the things underneath that?
Yeah, so if you recall from the PowerPoint that Bear Planning Group put together when we were going through the exercises, all of the recommendations fell under the 5 themes. So preserving the natural environment, sense of community, center square, a resilient balanced growth, and ensuring sustainability. And this is the way that the master plan will be presented, at least in the formalized portion. Obviously, I think as we mentioned previously, the technical papers, which we'll discuss when we get to the status of the master plan, will be included in some sort of form within the actual plan document, but more so in the appendix as white papers for information for whoever wants that information. But these were the 5 themes that were lifted to the top based on the recommendations and based on, I think, the conversations we were taking away from the committee meetings, focus groups, and other engagement efforts.
On the first bullet, I'm not sure how you chose those 3 roads, but can we generalize it a little bit? Summers and other roads to be identified, because, for instance, Pease Road is probably as scenic or more scenic than Prospect Street, which is solid housing. Just a thought.
So is your suggestion, George, then investigating protection of scenic roads and roadway trees through the passage of the Scenic Roads Act, including Summers Road and others?
And others, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think this is the time or place to get into what roads in addition need to be named, but we're going to leave it open-ended so we can name some others.
I would agree. I would agree with that statement. Anyone else? Connor, did you finish asking your questions? I know you may have had some follow-ups.
Yeah, my only other one that I was thinking of was, at least in my breakout group, I know we also talked a lot about like general prioritization of things, of whether people felt that certain ones were important or applicable or not applicable. And I don't know where that falls into this summary document.
I mean, I think the general thing that you could come out of this with, having that as a goal or a statement in itself, investigating the scenic roads through the Scenic Roads Act, if that's not currently happening in the town at the moment, obviously the inclusion of the statement would suggest that exploring this process would probably open up the identification of the roads. I think George is suggesting Summers Road as to start. I don't know if there's either stronger language or, I don't know. I guess I leave it up to the committee and the people to maybe fine tune that particular sentence.
I wasn't necessarily saying this particular bullet point, but like to get rid of it. I just meant like, I know through like the themes that we went through, we definitely had some discussion about whether people felt like when we get to the Rotary one, for example, where we said that one wasn't really one of the most important things out of that entire theme. I just want to make sure we're not losing track of like deprioritizing that compared to all the others. I just don't know if that was part of this summary overview or if that's just something that's getting skipped to the last preparation step of the document.
No, but I think it's good to note that. I think it was very clear too, with regard to the Rotary, it's kind of this elephant in the room where, it makes sense to at least put it in the plans to address it, knowing that the town has addressed this probably numerous times, but there are certain things within the mechanisms to fund additional studies, to fund any additional improvements that kind of have made this something, you know, in the back of, you know, a town resident's mind to address. But I think that, you know, having that particular point where we address rotary safety be something that is de-emphasized is definitely something that we can put into the matrix as something like a long-term, you know, type of priority.
And I think the matrix will really lay out what priorities, which ones are higher priority.
Yeah, so
the recommendations here in this summary.
Yeah, so what the goal of this particular exercise is going to do is to identify the particular wordings of these. These exist either as additional recommendations and or modifications to the previously, you know, reviewed recommendations based on the implementation workshop. So what comes from this is the matrix that you may be familiar with, that now has all these new recommendation statements that will, you know, you'll be able to address the boards or the various agencies that would help implement, as well as the funding mechanism or resources and priority. So that's going to be the task right after this. So that's going to be the turnaround that will prepare for the purposes of, you know, ensuring that now you have all of the recommendations in one place and what the priorities and the agencies and the resources are in that tool. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna probably suggest then not necessarily taking into account the specificity of these roads, but because this is a new concept, maybe you're just including Summers Road as George has suggested. Explore increased density for all household types and abilities in blah, blah, blah. So that I think makes sense to me. I don't know if the committee has any feelings towards that.
Yeah, I think that just expands upon on that.
This open space and recreation plan, that was an existing recommendation, but now tying into, and I recall this from my breakout room, multi-use trail system that includes other destinations like Center Square and even to surrounding towns, incorporating disability-friendly upgrades into the effort. And then I think, again, it's just an expansion of the context. But does that make sense? Do you think we're emphasizing too much? Do you?
No, I think that works. I think it would have worked without it, but I think that just makes it even more clear to consider all of those different things.
Great.
I would agree.
That's not meant to be all inclusive, is it, Ken? So if it's not here, then it's.
No, it's not meant to be all inclusive. I think that
just like,
you know,
examples, so to speak.
It's example, so to speak, but you know, it's a multi-use trail system. So I'm sure that you can incorporate when you're applying for any sort of park grant or any other type of funding, that the language here in itself won't hold you to these specific places. So you'd be able to designate areas where you think makes sense to tie into that trail system, because this is suggesting the trail system. And then Heritage Park Lake for recreational land. So I think it just adds some specificity to that, which is always helpful.
Okay.
The next one was, yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So as you're maintaining 7-year updates, are you creating one document, or does each, the open space and recreation? I guess that is one plan. Okay, so it's just, you're gonna connect the master plan to the 7-year update of the open space and recreation plan.
The recommendation will be to ensure maintenance of the 7-year open space plan.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So that we keep that current which is what the Open Space Committee, got on track again.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So this mosquito one, I think that makes sense via safe control methods. And so this was, I think the additional recommendations are the ones that the committee may want to either suggest including or, at least just putting in the appendix in the form of this document to suggest that it was looked at. Because we don't necessarily need to include it if this is new, because this is new. But this was one of the additional recommendations. Consider removing the stormwater management and dam removal recommendations as the MS4 permit standards are being pursued and most are unaware of Jawbuck Dam.
I would agree with that, Ken. The MS4 permit is dictating what the town does.
Mhm.
And if the dam is included, then so be it. I would rather use space for something else.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I think there's probably plenty of other things in here to focus on.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, so again, I think, if we're not necessarily going to address these additional recommendations with its inclusion into the plan, I think the fact that it's going to be in the appendix in this summary the town will have the record that, this was discussed at the implementation workshop. So
Good.
I think, you're all set with regards to that. Sense of community. So these were some refined statements based on the implementation workshop. I know that home occupations and cottage industries was a discussion. And it sounds as if the new recommended language is forward the cottage industry bylaw and work with residents to promote home occupations and cottage industries within their residential buildings.
We've actually started that with a new bylaw change that's underway to allow, and I'm sure George can speak to this, the cottage food operation exemption in the residential zone under the accessory use bylaw. So that's what's coming right now.
Yeah, correct. The planning board actually voted to approve that at the last meeting, and it is going to go to the council
Right.
in the very near future. So that's in progress. I think in the plan, what you might do is drop the wording that says forward and just leave work with residents to promote home occupations and cottage industries within their residential buildings.
So the way that it was originally written. So in the black, right, George? So this.
Yeah.
Yes.
You prefer that sentence better.
Yeah, I like that sentence better because it includes the adequate protections, which is a concern of mine, certainly.
Okay. How does everyone feel about that?
Yeah, I think that works. It leaves it a bit more open-ended and not specific to one progress of a particular bylaw too.
Yeah, and I think, when we work with communities, especially communities that are either updating their master plan elements or working on a master plan, we like to include low-hanging fruit, and it sounds as if, the town is working towards this with regards to food. And I think it's one of those things when you dust this off, well, not dust it off, but when you get started with your master plan implementation committee, that's something that you're going to be celebrating within a year, right? So you're gonna accomplish, some sort of you're gonna have an accomplishment within regards to this particular recommendation. So it's always great to include that into your plan. So this next one, and I feel like the housing ones, since we started last year, have kind of refined and changed over time. And it looks like throughout the course of this particular master plan process, there's been discussion of the refining to include all housing types or different types of housing types, and the abilities of the people that would be living in them. So I think this reflects that language, and the town supporting increased mixed use housing development. It doesn't necessarily, suggest, in my opinion, doesn't suggest anything out of the ordinary, but I don't know if the committee has feelings towards this.
I'm not sure, Ken. We have already begun, through our mixed use village district bylaw to support this concept. And within that bylaw, we have a portion for 10% affordable. So, I don't know whether when you say increased, does that send the message that every 40-acre parcel should have a mixed use village district placed on it? We're a community of 17,000 residents. Where a lot of the areas developed, in the areas where it's not developed, it's all concentrated in one area. So I'm not sure whether the message would be that those areas would then be occupied with this type of use.
For that type of use.
Diversity of housing has always been important for East Longmeadow.
I think I know where you're going, Marilyn. So the word increased may have a different connotation. And I don't know. How does the committee feel about the inclusion of that word? I think it does have a different connotation if you remove that word. But at the same time, I think for all household types and abilities, that is probably some neutral language that would be helpful for the context of this. Yeah.
Maybe if I had an example, what is support increased versus just support? To me, the town embraced it.
Yeah.
And, so we're supporting it. But I'm a little tired today, so maybe I'm not.
I would agree with Marilyn that increased is maybe a little too strong a word. Mixed use is a great use, but it only fits in certain places and under the right conditions. And so I think increased is sort of, well, first of all, we don't have any yet. So increased isn't really appropriate. And secondly, I don't think it's a high priority. I think it's something that needs to be very targeted.
That's fair. Anyone else? Otherwise, I think we'll just, for this particular bullet, remove that word, but keep everything else.
I'm fine with that.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Sense of community. So this other one, I know this was a conversation in my group with regards to some of these tools. So this one is consider bylaws and ordinances that preserve cultural and historic resources in coordination with economic development efforts, and then a list of various regulatory tools for that. And this may be an instance where, I think in coordination with economic development efforts makes sense within the context of the way that it was presented, specifically if the town may be looking at adopting some sort of cultural district in the center, or which these would be helpful. But I don't know, I guess if you have any opinions with the way this is worded, I'd love to hear them.
I mean, I don't think the language hurts, but at the same point in time, I think probably most of those things, if they were to happen, probably would happen as a result of some economic issue happening to begin with that kind of pushes the issue. I don't think that
Yeah.
we're necessarily just gonna take all 10 of those just because we feel like it on a rainy Tuesday.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It probably, these particular things are going to be reactive, because sometimes they end up being a reactive thing that happens. I know in the community that I used to work with, demolition delay was something that came after the fact. A historical building was torn down. They didn't have the protection, and they said, now we're going to just make it harder for those developers through this particular bylaw that they passed. But you're right. It's not something that, you know, the town is going to like go through each of these and, you know, identify. I think these are just examples of things that would help you implement some preservation of cultural and historical resources. Okay. The next one is update the current East Longmeadow current community preservation plan to guide the community preservation committee outreach process, educate the public, and outline future funding priorities, particularly for homeowners. Use the master plan as a guide for this.
Ken, that particular item was discussed a lot in our group. And I brought up the issue that, and I think George will remember this, that, you know, we have a plan in place right now that focuses more on historical preservation and open space and recreation. And our weak link is affordable housing, and coming up with some kind of a plan that works for the town, that we can offer some relief to individual homeowners if they meet the financial criteria, perhaps with assistance with a roof or a heating system or something that would enhance their struggle. And so I think this is important, personally.
Yeah, I agree with the importance of it. I guess I was just thrown off by when it just says particularly for homeowners. I
Right.
just didn't know quite what that meant in the sentence.
That was a piece, and I almost think I had a discussion with George on this, because I have a copy of a plan that had been put together, which I thought was pretty specific, but at the time it wasn't adopted by the Board of Selectmen, and so it fell by the wayside. At least that's the explanation I got. So
I guess, you know, I think for the purposes of this particular line, which is, to your point, Marilyn, I think that's very important, especially if, you know, historically the Community Preservation Committee was, you know, putting their efforts towards funding open space and natural resources projects and historic projects, that if housing was, you know, not discussed, that housing should at least be brought back into the process for review or understanding.
I'm not trying to send the message that historic preservation and open space and recreation are not important uses. It's just that we haven't really done anything in the affordable category that I'm aware of.
And one of the issues there has been ownership of that effort, okay? Community Preservation Committee is not in a position to administer a home rehabilitation program. And the Housing Authority has declined to get involved with that. So the question is, who's going to do it? And
I didn't realize that, George.
Yeah. They have their hands full with dealing with the properties that they own, okay? I know that this is done because I know other towns do it. I just don't know how it's done. A lot of it is done being administered by PVPC, okay, under revolving loan fund. If the town wanted to set something like that up, we'd have to have somebody to, or delegate or hire PVPC to administer that, to make sure that it's done properly, that the money is used what it's supposed to be used for, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right, you hit that's correct. That especially with affordable housing, initiatives that would be covered under Community Preservation Act normally, or some communities have either identified a trust fund or these other types of efforts that would require some sort of third-party review and not necessarily be, incorporated into the town government process. But that's something that would obviously be explored if you're extending housing or reintroducing or exploring housing type of initiatives under the CPC. So maybe instead of, because I guess I'm curious about the word homeowners, but maybe particularly for, or an outline future funding priorities, including housing initiatives, affordable housing initiatives.
I know that the CPC funds had been used for, I believe, a generator use for either Brownstone Gardens, which is low to moderate income, or the Housing Authority. I'm not sure which. I don't know, and so that's an agency or a developer.
Yeah.
It's not an individual homeowner, and that was the piece that I was focusing on.
Okay.
I hear what George has to say, but
Yeah, I don't know what language we could use that would just broaden it to say like assistance to people that own property in town that need help. However we word that.
Well, if you leave it for homeowners, I think that's appropriate. Just recognize that we do not have a mechanism in place to do that. And it may be one of the goals to find that mechanism or create the mechanism.
Yeah, I know that, I'm sure that, as we continue also in the planning process that we're doing with the community through the housing production plan, that's going to be a conversation with regards to how to utilize the various funding sources that the community has at its disposal and the various resources that are there. But I think I now get your point, Marilyn, with regards to homeowners. I was confused and thrown off by the intent of using the CPC funds. But I understand that with regards to the uses by the generator use that was funded by CPC for Brownstone or in the Housing Authority, that there is the possibility of using those funds to also support individual homeowners in updating their property, et cetera.
that meet the financial criteria.
That meet the criteria, right.
Maybe should we add that, particularly for homeowners?
Who meet the financial criteria?
Well, I mean, that might explain why they're being lumped in with community preservation. I don't know, that just popped into my head.
Well, that's a good idea, because I think now we all understand what that language is supposed to mean, but hopefully someone else will get the idea of what the word homeowners means lumped in there. Read it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll finesse that. I'll share that. You'll see it in the matrix. And if you don't like that language, then you can draw attention to that too. Prepare progressive Americans ADA self-evaluation and transition plan while maintaining ADA-related amenities. I think that doesn't necessarily deter from the spirit of that by adding, some descriptors. But I don't know if the committee has any thoughts regarding that one.
I think that's fine with me.
Identify where the vulnerable residents, including the disabled and the elderly, live for check-ins and partner with the Council on Aging and utilities as necessary to complete this list. So just adding another descriptor of the vulnerable residents. So I think we may have initially thought that was mostly the elderly, but maybe it also included the disabled, but I think this now just suggests including those two particular populations. So I think that's helpful. So these are the additional recommendations. There was a recommendation about community gardens. I'll have to find that language to remove it. Additionally, let's see, recommendation made to remove the mention of local historic districts. Oh yes, that was in my group. And George may have some additional context for this, but I don't know if, this is something that the town either is moving towards or is thinking of making, I don't know. I don't know if, this is something that is still a big advocacy point for the town. I think it was brought up based on conversation with Shannon and whoever worked with Shannon, I think Bruce Moore. But I think in my group, there was some heartache with regards to, some of this discussion with local historic districts.
10 years back, there was, discussion about a historic district. And the problem is we do have houses, residential homes that would qualify, but they're all dispersed throughout the community. There's no real center of an entire village or numbers of houses in close proximity to one another. That, to me, that would identify as a district. We have the depot now, the Norcross House and the Museum House that are a historic focal point for the community. But in terms of a district, unless George, you're thinking of something that I can't, we have houses, but they're on different streets, not close to one another.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but you could say that the depot, the historic house and the Norcross House it became a 3-lot or 2-lot, depending on the convoluted ownership of the Norcross House district. If you wanted to do that,
Yeah.
That's all I can think of, in terms of actually historic district.
Right.
Yeah, because everything else is scattered all around. But I think we might, instead of district, you might put in something about identifying and certifying historic buildings in town. Because that's not something that we've had a lot of action by the Historical Commission doing.
Do you think that by doing so, or suggesting that there be advocacy towards that, that may change the dynamics of your site plan review process and design review process? Like, would you be suggesting that maybe looking at those particular processes, now including the fact whether or not that's a historic building, not necessarily to deny a permit or a site plan review, but create a, an acknowledgement that that is a historic building that you may be addressing now, if you're going to redevelop or do something with the building?
Yeah, I would think that that's the direction would be going.
Okay.
And particularly and even adjacent properties that would be inconsistent with the historic building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm smiling because the solar panels on the roof of a historic building don't meet the criteria of a historic building.
Are there any instances of that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
But we do have a number of older homes in community.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look at that statement one more time. Okay, so this was a recommendation. This obviously falls under economic development, but have a town marketing plan to entice developers and market East Longmeadow to businesses. I think that this also may be happening as you're going through the rapid recovery process too. This may be something that may be coming to the top as regard to a marketing plan. But I don't know, is there any thoughts with having this in the master plan?
I kind of like the idea of it. And I think it leaves it slightly open-ended in the sense that it's not saying we necessarily want every square inch of town to become developed and marketed, but at the same point in time, it could help fill a lot of the existing vacancies that we already have.
Yeah,
In your various districts. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna, I totally agree with Connor in that regard. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
I like it because it would allow us to apply for grants to do this, which I think is something that could be beneficial to make sure that we're to try to attract the kind of businesses that the people in this town want. Instead of waiting for people to come in to an empty retail site and tell us what they're going to do without, consultation or thought about whether this fits in with the town.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Ken, who undertakes that, the development of that plan? Is that the implementation team?
Not necessarily. I think that's going to be a conversation is who, because we've somewhat preliminarily identified the groups based on, the previous recommendations. If you have, where I've seen this done is, and I don't want to necessarily provide additional work for Bethany, but, the planning department, in absence of a economic development arm, sometimes would be doing something like this. So not necessarily her, but, there would be some sort of arm of economic development that would be coming out from town government. And if you think this leads to now suggesting an additional staff person, that probably is a conversation that we need to, address at this point too. If you think that it can't be handled internally or within a town board or committee.
Well, one of Bethany's titles is Commercial Development Director. So I think I know where it starts.
We also, in our former government, years back, we had an economic development committee. And, they worked with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure the specifics of the focus at that point. I it's been a while, but it's certainly something that we could revisit. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of coordination across there between the planning department, planning board, and even town council, depending on what types of things the town wants to do to attract people.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a collaborative effort. Generally marketing is so, but I would see that as something I would start off in my department.
Great.
Next week.
Yeah, right.
Hey, can I just ask, is that something that would be inclusive of businesses only, or can we consider, potential residential developers as well?
No, you mean adding to this? Well,
Yeah,
not necessarily.
Businesses and residential. I don't know. Is that something we can add there?
I think it probably is implied when you have a marketing plan. We can add residents too, but because there is obviously the bridge between housing and economic development. I don't know if, it may change the dynamics of this particular statement with regards to the building of economic development. I think that a marketing plan would include a component of housing, or at least allude to, how to include housing into the conversation. But if the committee thinks that, you may want to include housing developers or any instance of housing, that this would be a good place for it.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't know if it needed to be that specific or not.
Okay.
If not, then it's no big deal.
Okay. Center Square. So here's one of the Rotary comments. I think it was generally stated as to improve safe access to local businesses, but now includes, based on this recommendation, and traffic improvements as well as other frequently traveled points. I think that is neutral.
Yeah, I kind of think it would almost be better if we just reworded that one to say like pursue safety and traffic improvements to local businesses and other frequently traveled points, or something that kind of leaves it semi-broad and specific, but not trying to focus it on the Rotary too much either.
Because yeah, I mean, that makes sense too, because this is a theme under Center Square, so it doesn't necessarily, draw attention to the language using the Rotary. You want to repeat that sentence one more time, Connor?
Yeah, what did I say? I think pursue safety and traffic improvements to local businesses as well as other frequently traveled points.
To enhance access to local businesses, or?
Yeah, that works too.
Ken, I'm wondering, is there any value? We have so many traffic studies on the shelf for town center to revisit, look at it again. I take a second look. Maybe that's nothing that needs to be in the master plan, but we've looked at so many ways to try to improve safe travel through the center, and you're locked with the structures that are there.
So, well, I think within the narrative, we can probably say that there exists a trove of analysis on, Rotary safety studies and improvement studies that the town can utilize to assist with some of these, points to implement. Do you think that captures it, or are you thinking something else?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's, I just know how hard the town has tried, really, over time to try to correct this. A little bit of humor. There was a picture on Facebook a few days ago of a speed bump at every street coming into the center of East Longmeadow, just to try to slow the traffic down. That's the problem. I think people who are courteous and careful, it's not an issue. It's people who aren't. And
all right. Well, I think we can think about that. I took note of that. So I think this just refines the comments about sidewalks and crosswalks through the town center, just improving condition and accessibility. Because I think their discussion of ADA compliance and making sure the rumble strips at the crosswalks were up to date and could be improved. So I think that makes sense that it's there as a recommendation. So these were brought up: avoid traffic light and signage at the Rotary, and avoid traffic studies.
Hey,
there you go. So this other one, I don't know if this is something that the committee wants to think about. Consider expanding the rail trail north to Springfield to enhance North Main Street. I think that came up in my section. It might have come up in another too.
I think it came up in ours too, but I think in ours it was less specific to just heading towards Springfield, but just expanding it in any direction.
Yeah, I think
north, south.
I think that was initially part of when they did the voting after the fact, it was specific to north, and I was curious why, because I would like to go south as well. You know, I think that, I know we're heading into
Yeah.
Connecticut, but I think south is also ideal.
And I think I remember talking to, it might have been Bethany, who had either through the town manager or another committee member was saying something about extending the rail trail south. So I don't know if our, either the way we presented it suggests that it is not open-ended, but I think that it makes sense that if you're going north, you should also just kind of create continuation south and other points.
Yeah.
The
I could,
six-
go ahead, Marilyn.
Okay, I was just to say the success of extending the trail in either direction is directly related to access to the property. And I can't speak to it. I don't know if George knows. There is going south. There's a block of land that we can't get to right now. And so at least that's what I understand. I don't know if that's changed, but there's been the interest to grow a long time ago, but it's the property access that's the issue.
Okay.
Okay, if Bethany doesn't mind, I'll jump in with a couple of facts here. First of all, we had a conversation recently with the state rails people, rails and trail people, who have dotted lines from our rail trail into Springfield. Okay, so it's on their radar screen,
Okay.
which means there may be money available in the future. We also, as of Monday, there was a meeting in Enfield where the state was talking about taking over the rail bed and putting a trail in up to the Massachusetts line, which is us. Okay, so there's action on both ends, and not knowing what will develop, I think having it in the master plan makes us much more likely to get money if money becomes available. And so even though we may not have access to the land right now, that could change. If Connecticut takes over the right of way in Connecticut, whatever Pan Am's going to do with half a mile of nothing, I don't know.
Good
But
point.
it may become available again. We don't know.
Great.
Okay.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this might be duplicative because I think we talk about rail trail up here. And so we'll just make sure that it doesn't just include north to Main Street. I guess that's what I'm saying, that we should also include point south. I think this is just for a point of clarification, change the language from public services complex to public safety complex. That came from one of the recommendations from DPW. Invest, so this is in now the resilient balanced growth theme. Revising subdivision rules and regulations. So I think that is, a common recommendation just to take another look at to reflect, either low impact development or some other ideas with regards to subdivision and home building. But in addition to that, focus on enforcement mechanisms. And I know this usually comes up in many of the communities that I work with regards to how to enforce and ensure enforcement of those regulations. So I think it makes sense that it's there and it helps. But I don't know if you have any thoughts with regard to that one.
I think it's
Okay.
good.
So I know that this language in my section did become a talking point with regards to the town's education system continuing to prosper and modernize. That was, that I think that was agreeable. I think there was a discussion with regards to the context by which the language should be in support of the East Longmeadow Public Schools Facilities Plan. So is it the town, I guess that there was, the person thought that there may have been some suggestion of a political statement being used in this particular recommendation. In reviewing it, I'm not sure. I think it definitely is expanded by the inclusion of this additional wording. But I don't know. What do you think? What are the thoughts of the committee on this? Where it suggests that the town should continue to support the East Longmeadow Public Schools facilities plan.
I don't see an issue with that. The only thing I would potentially change with that bullet is just removing the like such as voting, so that we're not necessarily calling out one specific type of event, but otherwise that looks good to me.
Yeah, that was, I also agree with Connor on that one. That was my only other suggestion, is that if anything would probably be viewed as political, it's the fact that it says voting in there. So if we just removed it, then we just left it as events, and I think that would be fine.
You know, last night's town budget was adopted, and it includes debt service bonding for a architectural study for the high school. So we certainly are supporting that,
Support of that.
going forward. So
Okay.
I don't know about the political piece. I don't have any trouble with what's written here.
Okay. All right.
I think basically you want the school buildings to be seen as a hub for community activity. And to Marilyn's point, the feasibility study will give us an idea of what the high school or a comprehensive project at the high school can become. And part of that has to be beyond educational programming, what else does it offer the community? So I mean, I think it's important that you keep this in here so that there's a focus. Because it should have services that can be provided to all ages.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the inclusion of this new language does help that statement, you know, and helps the intent of that statement.
And you're taking the voting out, you know, I mean, I think you're going to place voting in municipal buildings somewhere. So I think that might be a given. So whether you have the wording or not, probably doesn't matter.
Okay. All right.
Marilyn, do you know who or when or how they set voting and where it was going to be and when they switched, say, to one school?
I think the
Is that select board?
that happened. Yes, it happened before the change in government. And
I wasn't taking it one way or the other in terms of.
No. I'm just thinking in terms of my timing.
Yeah.
It may have been the select board that made that decision to do it all in one precinct, you know, to have all 4 precincts at one voting location. I mean, for years we had 4 schools that were voting places. So,
yeah, I remember that. That was a long time ago.
That's tough for a candidate.
Yeah, it was probably like
voting around. Yeah, sure.
Mid 2000s.
Before you were born, Connor.
No, I was around then. I remember going to Meadowbrook.
I don't know if that.
So this next one was put in with regards to making sure that a statement was made, ensuring that the master plan is linked to some sort of process and making sure the implementation of the master plan is linked to a process. And this spells out that process, phasing out this particular committee and replacing with the implementation committee reporting to the town council, which normally would be the case. Let's see, what else?
I like the clarification of like the phasing out and replacement with. The only part that I'm just not sure about is it actually the town council that committee would report to? I don't know. Is that like a legislative thing or is that an executive function? Because if there's budgetary things, that would have to really be the town manager's side of.
That's a good question. And the way that, yeah, and I think that could be refined, actually. I recall from, working in a community that had a master plan, the town manager was responsible for the implementation component and working with the implementation committee. And so through the town manager, obviously that report went to the town council. But I think we can clarify that language with regards to who the reporting is to. But I think this makes it, I think more effective with regards to the process by which the town should be employing to ensure that there are these mechanisms in place.
Really, under the charter, I think that it should be reporting to the town manager, because the town manager would then report the results to the council, which would be the proper chain of command, if you will. Marilyn, would you agree?
I absolutely agree, but I don't want to leave the planning board, zoning and community development out of this process. I was thinking that it might be a collaborative effort actually between Bethany and the town manager with this type of focus, because the expertise is in Bethany's world more than the town manager, I think, with the kinds of things we implement, zoning changes, ordinances.
I would agree with you in part, Marilyn, but this is much broader than the ambit of the planning board, and even wider than Bethany's charge. So, I would hope that the planning board would be represented on this committee, but that
the town manager be the lead of this.
Because the town manager could pull in other departments.
Correct.
Okay? I mean, that was the whole concept of the charter, is to have one government, not 6, which is what we had before. And so I think the town manager is the appropriate reporting thing, but we would want, and I wouldn't want to put this in the plan, but we would hope that committee would be representative of the players.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think too, in the implementation section of the previous plan, but would probably exist as a component of the appendix, with regards to the additional, where am I trying to go with this? I lost my train of thought. Sorry. It'll come back to me. Anyway, I'm totally lost. I don't know where I was going with that. We'll just move on and hopefully it comes back. Okay, so the additional recommendation, I think that we should keep the housing production plan as a task. We'll just allude to the fact that the town is working on it because it is something to celebrate in the next year or two. Emphasize attached ADUs. Oh, this is the accessory apartment. And I know that we had, I think, even tried to use language that was a little more like explore the benefits of an ADU. So I don't know if, this either captures the same thing or suggests that now putting it into the purview of the town and something that the town should be looking at in ADUs and really using that as a way forward to, move forward.
This, go ahead. There was a while back, we had growth management studies and we had a accessory apartment bylaw before the town meeting that didn't fare well. We've had discussions with Council on Aging and the need for this type of unit, but nobody wants tiny houses. And, because East Longmeadow basically has this this picture of being single family housings. I mean, single family houses on one lot. And I know that right now these accessory apartments, and they are being built, are attached to the primary residential structure. So it appears as though it's a single family home, but it does satisfy the need of aging parents or a sibling who might need that type of residence close to home. We also have a bylaw currently in place that prohibits residents or living quarters in an accessory unit. So that would have to be changed if we went down this other path. I would, I enjoy seeing the way it's happening right now, so that the single family house and the accessory apartment attached to it gives that look of a single family unit. I don't know, that's just an opinion, because I know my town. I don't know if George has any suggestions, but even the council, this came up when Connie Broaders was our director, and there was some discussion about accessory apartments, and it met with some challenges.
Well, they're challenging because the concept is great. The enforcement is impossible. And once you do it, you end up with, not everybody is responsible, let's face it. And people rent these things out to non-family members, and there's no way to police that. And so you could have basically a fraternity house. I mean, that's an issue for, I think, a lot of people in town.
So maybe it's worthwhile to just utilize the language that we had initially, which was exploring the benefits, because I think what we had gathered from the housing committee was that, or the group working on the housing update, the master plan element, was that currently, as Marilyn had stated, that there may be these unofficial attached units that are not necessarily codified within your town zoning, and may be conflicted at the moment with the current zoning language. So exploring the benefits of maybe adopting to bring that to the forefront for an attached product may be worthwhile to this effort. And so maybe it's not necessarily using this language, but using the previous language, which I think the committee was fine with. But I don't know, are there thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, I think that's fine with the attached one, because my neighbor has one right next to me and it's been completely fine.
Good. Okay. I'm just trying to review time.
And I had a question, sorry.
Yeah.
Backwards.
Sure.
Just the one about the regular meetings to report out the town's progress on the master plan.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering, because so every, or most boards submit a annual report. So would this fall under that annual report, or would that be something different?
I think the master plan implementation committee can decide, what that might look like. Some communities have adopted town bylaws to facilitate the process of a master plan. I don't know if that's something that the town would be looking at, but the annual reports are a good way for the master plan implementation committee to say, this is the work that has happened, and we've coordinated with these other boards that are responsible for implementing this, and that would, in effect, use that. But I do think that there's always there's always a benefit to having some sort of all boards meeting to discuss master plan and implementation in person, and as we're going to start to open up, but outside of an annual report. So I think it is a mechanism that, if the town wants to employ just using the annual report, then it can, but my suggestion would also to be, trying to convene in person through an all boards meeting. Okay. So in the interest of time, because I just want to, talk about some of the other tests and give you some dates for deliverables. This was a one that this came up in my group, considering an anti-blight bylaw, identifying vacant non-resident owned property and bill the owner the cost to improve and upgrade. I don't know if that's something that at this point the board or the committee may want to include in this plan. If there's, I don't know, any thoughts with regard to that. I know that.
I'm thinking about the Board of Selectmen, and it may have been a general bylaw. I'm not even sure if it was a general bylaw, and maybe someone else with a better memory remembers, but there were properties that were left in disrepair. I'm not sure. It was more landscaping, I think. And then the town just went in and cleaned it up and they assessed the owner. But it was based on a vote or a decision of a previous Board of Selectmen. I don't know if that would fall into this type of concern, because we do.
It might, yeah. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I guess, well, we'll take a look and see if that already is on the books. I mean, the thing is whether or not the town is currently administering that, or if there's a process by which, something like that could happen, usually through the building department. But we can maybe take a look. But I don't know if this is of a major concern, or at least been brought to the forefront by town councilors or others,
right,
to address that issue. Again, I think this could be an instance where this exists in the plan, as in, in the appendix that it was discussed.
Yeah, perhaps it's just an appendix thing, because I almost think that that's trying to fix the wrong problem. It's trying to just target specific properties as opposed to going back to the whole economic marketing plan, that it's like, well, if you just attracted something new and better there, that wouldn't even be an issue.
That makes sense. Okay, so I think the rest of these probably just provide some additional descriptors, expanding EV charging stations within the green community, which is a component of that. Conduct outreach to understand why businesses have left. Working with the Five Towns Chamber. This was brought up to consider methods to improve the capacity of the dual use system. And I know Gordon just discussed that, and Marilyn discussed that when we were talking about that language with regards to the school facilities. So that was included within that particular bullet. And then review and summarize information already collected for a parking inventory to identify those parking spaces in town. And yeah, so I think
all of those ones look good to me.
Yeah, so I think those are. So what will happen from this point? I'm just going to stop share now. Is that we've gone through that language. I'm going to turn over a matrix to you, which will include those recommendations with the appropriate boards that have been identified in the previous plan by the staff people and have been finessed either through comments by this committee or others. And that will be in addition to the technical papers that I should have had today, but will not. And those will get to you probably on Monday. But the way that I imagined those technical papers working was, again, a component of those technical papers will be to inform the introduction, the community setting, and some of the introduction of the issues and opportunities that exist in the town within the plan document. The plan document itself, which will be the nice graphics, the nice photos, will be all the recommendations and the common themes. And there will be attention drawn to the resources, the authorities, and also some best practices that have been identified within the context of the plan, as well as things that have come out, from various conversations, and maybe some quotes that have come out from the surveys or from our efforts of engagement. So I think because that's the case, I'm okay with, you know, the committee looking at the plan over the next 2 weeks once you get it on Monday, or the technical papers, as the plan is currently being drafted. We may have to address that planning board meeting, in that second planning board meeting in June. And whether or not, and maybe this is a conversation to review the reporting that's going to be required by the grant. I know that in Blandford, we're probably working towards the first meeting in July to have our public hearing for the planning board, just because of the way that the calendar was working. And I think we may be okay. And, you know, Bethany, this is probably a conversation, you know, that we can have offline with regards to the scheduling of that planning board meeting. But with regards to the committee's work, reviewing the technical papers, which will be included into the appendix. And then, you know, the draft layout as those pages start coming in, of the recommendations that, you know, we've gone through over these processes at the final meeting. In my head, which is full of master plans and rapid recovery plans, that's what has come to mind with regards to East Longmeadow, and the timeline there. So Monday, you will get all of the technical papers from all the elements. It will be presented as what you saw previously as the goals, or not the goals, the issues and opportunities and some of the introduction language, without the goals and recommendations. So that will be taken away from that. And then what you will see, in addition to those technical papers or those white papers, is the matrix of the newly worded recommendations that we've talked about today, and that you've seen in the past, but now under these themes. And you'll see that matrix with the appropriate boards. And that should probably be reviewed in a similar timeline, as that is also kind of a product of the process as well.
And Ken, Monday is Memorial Day, so I will not be at work on Monday, but if you, I don't know if anybody else will be checking their emails, but if you're still sending that out on Monday, I will check my email and try to get it out to everybody.
Or, I mean, I think I probably will send that out to everyone.
Okay.
Bethany, if you don't mind, I will just send that out to the committee.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that'll work fine.
Okay. And those comments can trickle in, because again, it's going to be a matter of just ensuring that the changes that we've made and the way that it's presented makes sense within the context of the technical papers of which the master plan is based on. But I think we have captured on this engagement as well as previous engagements, most of the correct information. Any last comments?
Good work.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
I mean, it's a long journey, but to be surprised, I mean, it's a short journey. This is a very condensed process for a master plan, and I applaud the work of this committee and in reviewing and participating in the implementation workshops and the focus groups. This is a great group, and you know, I'm having seen each of you in our various engagement efforts, I think is a testament to this process working. The process is working for East Longmeadow. So hopefully, you know, you've felt the same way. I know that
Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
and hope that, you know, as both, you know, and I'll be continuing to stay in town working on the housing production plan. But, you know, this is, we're going to see this to the end, and we'll, you know, just take these next few weeks to finalize these last few products.
Great.
And Ken, when do you get back from vacation?
I am back from vacation. I'm going to be working on this, but I get back from vacation on Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Okay.
Next Wednesday, yeah. I have a draft email out to you for something else too, Bethany. So
okay. I'm just thinking about the planning board meeting and trying to make sure it's a little bit confusing on our end because we might be transitioning to in-person meetings. So there's a couple different elements that I'll need to coordinate and try to get a head start on.
Awesome. I'd love it. I mean, I'd want to be in person. I'm working with my boards on that too. So it's going to be an exciting time as people start going back to the office.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, Connor, take it away.
All right, so I think as part of all of that, we hit every item on the agenda. So I think our next meeting is June 23rd.
Right.
At the same time. And so then, so long as no one has anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Oh,
All right. Moved by Gordon and seconded by Marilyn. So we'll roll call. I'm a yes. Gordon,
Yes.
Marilyn,
yes.
and George.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all, and we'll see you next month.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
And enjoy your vacation.
Thanks so much.